Good afternoon, dear participants. Welcome to the webinar of the 3rd of November. We're happy to present you the webinar that will be focusing on the user acceptance and user-centric rollout of the electromobility. We have interesting speakers that will tell you much more about the topic. So it will be an exciting 1 hour. But before we start, I would like to once again remind you that this webinar is a part of the webinar series that we're organizing in POLIS, calling this webinars Mobilizing Mobility. And here you have an overview of the next webinars that will take place that we have planned for you in November. They all focus on different topics when it comes to transport and innovation in transport. Do not hesitate to go on our website and to check out the upcoming webinars. We can already share with you the webinar for next Thursday. And of course, before we start, I would like to remind you that our conference, as many other conferences this year, will be online. We're going virtual. Do not hesitate to go on our website to see the agenda that we have prepared for you, and also the registrations are open. We hope to see you all there. About today's webinar, the title is Planning User-Centric Electromobility, the Importance of User Acceptance. Today we have two projects, eCharge for Drivers and User-G, two sister projects, Horizon 2020 projects, but my colleagues will tell you more about it in a minute. Just a few very quick reminders. This meeting is being recorded and the recordings will be available and sent to you. Please keep your microphone muted when not speaking. And very important is that you can post all your questions in the Q&A box. So do not hesitate to post any questions. We are hoping to have a lot of them in order to facilitate the discussion. And here I would like to give the floor to our moderator of today, Professor Lieselot Vanhaverbeke from Free University of Brussels. A short bio. Lieselot Vanhaverbeke is an associate professor at Free University of Brussels, as I said, at the Department of Business Technology and Operation and the research group Mobility, Logistics and Automotive Technology, MOBI. She teaches statistics and leads a team of 10 researchers working on socioeconomic aspects of electric and autonomous vehicles, doing, for example, studies on technology acceptance of e-mobility, impact assessment of autonomous vehicles, and location optimization analysis for charging infrastructure. Without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to Lieselot. Lieselot.
Thank you very much, Sabina. Also from my part, welcome to all the participants. Very happy to see that many of you are attending this seminar. First of all, I would like to give you a short overview of the agenda of today. So we will first start with an introduction of the project eCharge for Drivers, one of the projects that will be discussed during this session. I will do that myself. And then next we have a joint presentation by Matilde Cinelato and Juan Gimenez about the user-G project and the results that they obtained with respect to a survey on user-centric e-mobility. Next up, we have a presentation by Javier, who has also results on a questionnaire that was conducted in Barcelona with respect to e-mobility. And then we will continue with a short discussion among the different speakers, and of course also welcome your questions and hope to take that in during the Q&A. That is what is up for the next hour in terms of an agenda. So let's first start with an introduction to the eCharge for Drivers project. You might be or not be familiar with the project. It recently started. It's a Horizon 2020 project that is actually coordinated by Dr. Vili Portuli from ICCS in Athens. And it's a quite nice consortium, many partners. And the focus of the project is improving the EV charging experience. And we focus on cities, but also on longer trips. And from there, the title, eCharge for Drivers, because we put the drivers at the center of this project. Now that the electric vehicles are leaving the rather, I would say, technology phase in their product life cycle, or entering the market of growth and going towards a global adoption and to the mass market. Well, that means that not only technology as such is important, but it's also the usability of that technology. And that's really the focus of that of this eCharge for Driving consortium. We have a project for 4 years. So it started in June 2020 and we're running until 2024. And we have 32 partners across 12 different countries. And the project is organized around demonstration areas. We have 10 demonstration areas in 9 countries. I can show you this on a map here. So here we see that the countries that are involved are all across Europe. We also have a Turkish partner, and that means that we have a lot of information to compare, a lot of information to be gathered, of course, but also a lot of information to compare across different regions, across different cities. So that gives us very nice opportunities in terms of research. The project is funded, of course, by the European Commission, and as already said, we run for 4 years. Now, let us have a look at the challenges that we want to tackle with this project. First of all, there is the improvement of the comfort of charging. We all know that, especially in the early years of driving an electric vehicle, charging and then especially charging in public areas via public charging stations can sometimes be a bit daunting. Looking around for the charging station as it was on a map, but in real life, it was not really easy to find, for example. Also broken infrastructure, how to use the infrastructure itself, not always clear, not always easy. And from the technology-minded users, we actually expect that they know how to handle this. But when we go to mass market, it means that we also need to make sure that this is easy in terms of usability. So that's about the comfort of the charging infrastructure. Also, well, the interoperability of services is an important element, and providing the appropriate information to users. Then we refer to the use of apps on mobile devices, for example, that can facilitate, that can support users when needing a charging station. Furthermore, we go for smart charging solutions. We all are familiar with vehicle-to-grid solutions that are also part of this project, but also the unidirectional charging solutions that operate in a rather smart way to optimize energy usage. And then, of course, the comfort of the electric vehicle driver. That is also one of the challenges that we want to tackle here. Not to forget the light electric vehicles. Usually we talk about charging stations or charging infrastructure And then we refer to cars or to light trucks, for example. But in this project, we also include the light electric vehicles. And so also there, the challenge of having a standardized charging infrastructure will be tackled. And finally, the wider deployment of charging infrastructure. When you look at the survey results, the request or the need for more public charging stations keeps coming back in terms of the answers of the respondents. So also that is something that will be tackled during this project. So these are the challenges that we want to take. And then in terms of objectives, well, the idea is that throughout the eCharge for Drivers project, we develop and we demonstrate user-friendly charging stations. So we will first think about them, design them, and then also implement them and have them tested by actual users. The idea is that we also enable and demonstrate the interoperability of the end-to-end communication with respect to the different standards that are well, generally adopted. And then the provision of enhanced information to EV drivers before, during, and after a charging session. Also, that is something that comes up in surveys when we look at research, and how can we actually facilitate that? How can we make users more comfortable in terms of providing that information? We will also look at maximization of benefits, and so also reduction of costs with respect to efficient use of charging stations and their components. So this is the design actually of the smart power management modules and the smart charging strategies that will be implemented. And then the stations, the solutions will be deployed and demonstrated in different ways. It depends on the application for passenger vehicles, for example, but also for the light vehicles. This cannot be done without understanding the user needs of the charging solution and for the services. And so the idea is that when we develop these solutions in the first phase of the project, we will then measure also how users experience that particular solution. And we hope that it will lead to an improvement in their experience. And all together, this project should lead to an acceleration of the deployment of charging infrastructure so that we can foresee in the needs in a sustainable and also in a user-centric way. How the project is conceptualized, I won't go into the details of all the work packages. I just want to show by having this figure on this slide that the users, they are really at the center of this project. And we have different work packages that are starting at this moment or have started already, VP1 until VP4, and these are really the preparation phase. So we are putting everything in place in terms of doing the necessary surveys and doing the technical design of the solutions that then will be demonstrated in work package 5. That will be the usage phase of the project. And of course, as said, we also want to analyze during the usage phase, during the demonstrations, but also afterwards, we will have an evaluation and an impact assessment of the user experience, and of course, come up with guidelines and recommendations. So this is really how the project is conceptualized and how it will be conducted. That was, I think, in a little bit more than 5 minutes, an overview of what the eCharge for Driver project is about. Of course, during the Q&A, don't hesitate. If you have more questions, we can come back to that. I will first give the floor to the other speakers and then briefly introduce the survey that we are about to launch for that focus on user centricity. So for the next presentation, we are very happy that we can actually collaborate during this webinar across the projects. We have eCharge for Drivers, but also User-Chai is on a project about e-mobility and charging solutions. And so we have Juan Gimenez who will be presenting the results and the project during this session. Juan is a mechanical engineer and a PhD by Polytechnic University of Valencia. He worked as a design engineer for a conveyor manufacturer in the automotive industry. And since 2006, he has been working at the Instituto de Biomecánica de Valencia. He is a researcher and a technologist in product development and user requirement identification. In user-centric project, Juan leads the team of the university and he focuses on the user requirements and the product validation. Juan, as a joint presentation with Matilde Chinelato, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Juan, can you please? Yeah, great. Thank you. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matilde Chinelato, and I'm a mobility project coordinator at Eurocities. And in the framework of user-centric, I'm coordinating the replication and communication activities. I'm giving you just a brief introduction to the project to then leave the floor really to the first concrete results of our users' needs analysis carried out within the project. And so user-centric, as you have heard, is a sister project to eCharge for drivers. And it's really about finding innovative solutions for user-centric charging infrastructure. It started in February this year and will run for 4 years. The previous, yes, thank you. So just to give you an idea of the challenges and where we have started our concept, why we have decided to take this direction, let's say, in the project. So we see that the majority, let's say, of EV owners right now are limited to the peri-urban areas, and that they are limited most often to the areas where they can have their own garage and they can charge their cars at their home. I think there was a slight issue with the volume. At the same time, we also see that the share of fully electric vehicles in most European member states is still quite low, and that we have very, let's say, weak current business models and revenues from the charging infrastructure, so that they are not actually enough to sustain the market growth in this sector. And so overall, we also see that we lack those innovative solutions that could allow EV drivers to have an experience, a mobility experience that is comparable to the one they might have with conventional vehicles. So overall, what we want to achieve is to really support an accelerated deployment of EV charging infrastructure across Europe by taking into account, of course, the user's perspective. How will we be doing this? So we will test innovative solutions, as I said, across 7 urban nodes that are located, as you can see from the map, on the Mediterranean and on the Mediterranean-Scandinavian transport network corridors. We have 5 demo sites and we have 2 replication cities that will replicate some of the solutions. If we go to the next slide, please, we will see the concrete objectives that we want to achieve. First of all, and very important today, is the fact that we want to design charging infrastructures that are really built around the user's needs, that put the user at the center. Secondly, we want to deploy a framework and platform for interoperability of the system. We want to roll out scalable infrastructures by means of smart grid integration. We also want to create charging systems that are highly convenient and innovative. We want to look at novel business and market models. As we've seen, this is an issue. And we also want to define a framework, a legal and regulatory framework and recommendations that can really push for a full deployment of the EV market. So as I said a moment ago, today we're going to really present the first concrete outcomes of the first objective, the users research analysis that my colleague Juan will present in a second. This is the very start of our project, and of course this will help shape all the different activities that we will have in our project, including all the solutions that will be tested in the demo sites. So without further delay, I would like to pass the floor to Juan for these results. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matilda. Okay, what we are going to present today is some of the results we got in the survey that we performed last July, the 2 last weeks. This is part of the user research that we perform, from qualitative research, quantitative research, we could say. We also perform other activities, more qualitative, to get information, and we design a survey for trying to get information from users from the 3 components of the electromobility, from the cars, from the charging infrastructure, and from the apps. So our objective was to have a sample size of 2,000 users. Nearly 30% of them were electric vehicles drivers, but were part of our sample size of our samples, the internal combustion engines vehicles and the light electric vehicles riders. So here in this picture, you can see the distribution of the sample. So we have users from the northern part of Europe, from Finland and from Norway. We also have users from Central Europe, from Hungary and Germany, and from the south of Europe, from Spain and from Italy. All these countries are part of user-centric consortium, but Norway is the most developed market for electric vehicles. So regarding the cars, we asked users how they are using the electric vehicles compared with internal combustion engine vehicles. And what we see is that most of the users are employing the electric vehicles as they were in internal combustion engines. There is only a difference in professionals that are employing the vehicles for transporting passengers. Probably this is due to the restrictions we have in the city centers. So the people who is transporting passengers is employing more and more electric vehicles, and from the long range trips, where more users are still employing internal combustion engine vehicles. But the satisfaction level with the cars is very similar. So what we extract from this result is that today electric vehicles are nearly substitution products for internal combustion engines, and users have assume that the electric vehicles are a perfect option for substituting or for being the main vehicle for them. And when we asked them for the purchase intention, we got that most of the drivers of electric vehicles, 90% of them, would buy again an electric vehicle as the main vehicle. And surprisingly, nearly 70% of the internal combustion engine drivers are ready for the change, want also to get into the new mobility and to get an electric vehicle. And they identify nearly nearly similar improvement features for the electric vehicle. They talk about the duration of batteries, the autonomy. The internal combustion engines vehicle drivers are more worried about the duration of batteries than the electric vehicles, but they think that the improvements are similar for both profiles of users. So what we conclude from here is that, as I was saying before, the market is ready for the electric vehicle, and this first component of electromobility, the vehicle, is reach the basic requirements that the user is demanding. But if we think in the charging network, when we ask the users what are the charging networks they want to have in the next generation of chargers to electric vehicles drivers, they are talking about all the things that they don't have today. They are talking about the standardization of technical components, because there are many types of plugs, many types of different AC, DC chargers. They are talking the access to the charging point. They want also to have an automatic detection of the properties of the car they have, and the charger that adapts to this to the features of the car. The availability of a charging infrastructure for the small neighborhood, because most of the users think that charging at home is very important. So if they cannot charge in a private parking lot, they at least want to have access to a charger near the neighborhood. Interoperability, excellent availability, and increase the charging point location, increase the number of charging points. So most of these comments or these items are talking about the difficulty that users of electric vehicles have for accessing to a charging point. And what they need is to have an easy access to this charging point. So when we are asking them which is the main features of the charging that they have today, which are the main features that they are more interested in, they are talking about having an easy access to this charging point, because they are talking about the charging point status. They want to know how is this charging point on this at this moment, if this is occupied, if it's working, is not out of order. They want to have information in real time about what is happening with the charging point that they have booked. If it's in users now, it will be free or for them to employ in the time when they arrive to the place, to the location where the charging point is. So again, as I was saying before, what we extract from here is that the access or the availability of charging point is not something, is something that is not solved, is not achieved. So the basic requirements for the users are not accomplished by the charging network. So what the users need is having a better access that today they don't have. If we think in the apps, there are a lot of apps in the market. Here we see a list of the apps that are more frequently used by the users. Not necessarily which are better, because there are apps like one that is presented in this graph, that is K Lataus, that for example is very well, is the best rated, but is not the most popular. Anyway, what we can see about the apps is that the rate is high, is 4.2 out of 5. And it's a problem that it's properly solved. So from the three components that we were saying before, it seems that the charging infrastructure is the component that doesn't have the basic requirements, or doesn't achieve the basic requirements that the user is demanding. Finally, when we were asking to the users how to improve the charging process, again we see that the amount of charging or charging points, the good access or the easy access for this charging point, and having information about how the charging point is working is critical for the users. So as a conclusion of our survey, I could say that I was saying before, from the three elements of electromobility, cars is properly solved. There are things to improve in the electric vehicles, but users have assumed that it's a product that can substitute perfectly the internal combustion engines. Apps can increase the amount of services that they are offering to the users, but also a product that works properly for users. But the charging infrastructure it needs to be deployed, needs to be developed, and needs to guarantee the users that when they are going to need a charging point, they are going to have the possibility to access. Oh, sorry, but okay, so thanks very much. And I think I missed one slide. So I will give the floor to the next.
Yes. So thank you very much, Juan and Matilda, of course, for the introduction of your of the project and of the results that you already obtained from the questionnaires. Very interesting and will be nice for the discussion later on. So we first go to another presentation on results of questionnaires, and that is by Javier Julve from Electromaps. Javier is an expert in electric mobility digital charging solutions at Electromaps, and over the last years he has coordinated the development of Electromaps EV driver survey. Javier has 8 years of international experience in Sweden, Germany and Switzerland, working in the energy clean tech sector. He has an electrical engineer degree and has a master's in global production engineering. Javier, the floor is yours. We will be most interested in hearing your results.
Thank you, Lieselot. Thank you a lot for the presentation. As Lieselot said, I'm working for Electromaps, which is basically, we are basically a software company, we're a private company, and we deploy digital charging solutions, both for the end user, the EV driver, and for the owner of the charging stations, the CPO. My company started back in 2009. We are one of the early movers in that sector, and we are located in Barcelona. We are currently the leading solution in Southern Europe. We have a great relationship with the end drivers, with the EV drivers, and our services are being currently used by 95% of the EV drivers. Our solutions there are made in a cooperative way, so that we have built a community of EV drivers in that sense, in order to have the most reliable information. And through our application, through our mobile applications, we provide access to all charging stations in Europe in the public space. So we have a deep knowledge about charging and electric mobility in general. What we realized a few years back is that there was a lack of knowledge, of data knowledge in the media, and that there were so-called many experts giving lies about EV charging, about electric vehicles. And we decided that in order to confront these opinions that appear in the media, we needed to have some real data. So we decided by ourselves to start to make surveys, yearly surveys about different topics to our EV drivers community. We started making the surveys in Spain, and last year we started doing them in Spain and Portugal as well. Our surveys are quite long. They have over 100 questions, and we have a high success ratio, as at the last one, 1,400 users, they answered in 24 hours our survey. So this is quite successful. Just to put you on average, this is 1,400 users. They correspond to 5% of the EV drivers fleet in Spain at the time. Our survey is divided was divided in 7 areas. And right now, what I'm going to do is to present the most interesting questions of each of the different areas. But before, I want just to make you an overview about how is the EV driving in Spain, how is the regulation in Spain, what is the number of EVs that we have in Spain, how are the important regulations regarding EV driving in Spain. Because that's quite important to understand how we can deploy electric mobility in each country. It's quite important to understand as well what kind of EV regulation, specific EV regulation there is in place in every country. As you probably know, even if we are all of us in Europe, each country has a kind of different regulations, and this does affect highly the EV penetration. Well, let's start. Right now in Spain, we have around 2% of the car sales are being EVs or plug-in hybrids. We have one of the lowest shares of EV penetration in Europe. If we compare with other countries from our neighborhood, Portugal has a 40% share of new sales, France has 12, Germany has 15, the Netherlands, they have over 20. So in general, we are at the low end. Another important topic is that in Spain, we don't have roaming. EV roaming is not regulated. In what we have seen is that in most countries where roaming is regulated, the share of EVs on the streets is much higher. It's up to 5 or 6 times higher than we have in Spain. And the other important point that we see is that less than 35% of the charging stations in Spain, in public spaces in Spain, are connected to a charging management platform. This is a huge problem, as normally if you want to access charging stations, you need to identify yourself and you need to pay. And in advance, before going to that charge stations, you want to know if that charging station is working or not working. This number, this percentage is quite common across Europe, and it is something that if we want to develop electric mobility, now we have to increase. Right now in Spain, we have around 3,000 locations with charging stations and with a total of almost 70,000 charging points. It's important to mention that a charging location can have more charging points. And in average, in Spain, we have around 1,000 fast chargers, and the rest of them, they are slow chargers. Our first area of the survey was to know who is the kind of EV driver, to whom we are talking. And what we saw is that the age distribution of EV drivers is between 35 and 64. These are the biggest share of EV drivers. And that most of them, they have a high or medium education. They have gone to university, or they have some other kind of education. One of the main things that we wanted to realize, it was how they decided to buy the car. How was the shopping process? Most of the cars, EVs that we had here in Spain, they have been bought new at a car dealer, and they had a mixing buying experience. That means that in most cases, at the car dealer, he was not willing to sell an electric vehicle. And they offered a diesel car instead, an hybrid, or they were just saying lies about batteries, about charging stations. So my point here is that we have a huge problem in Europe when we talk with the car dealers, because they delay the procurement of EVs. They don't help to sell EVs, and the current regulation regarding that is not enough. And this is one of the main things for the low uptake of EVs. We have been talking besides with EV drivers, and it was used as the case that once they went to the car dealer, they knew far more things about EVs than the workers of the car dealer. Another important question we wanted to know is how is the charging? How are the charging patterns? If they charge at home, if they charge at work, if they use the public infrastructure, and if they could choose where this public infrastructure should be located. Obviously, what we found out is that these first EV drivers, most of them, they charge at home on a daily basis or a few times a week. And in some cases, if they have the chance, if they are willing to charge in the job. Public charging represents approximately about 20% of the total charging, and is performed in a quite randomly way. We have been talking to many EV drivers, and they were saying that they rarely charge on public premises. The important thing is when we ask them, where do you would like to charge your vehicle? Here, the most answers were on public roads or at my job. These are the good questions. And if they do a long-term trip, a long road trip, they prefer to stop at the gas stations and charge their vehicles there. Because, you know, when we go to a gas station, we just don't go to plug the vehicle. We go there to make a rest, to go to the bathroom, to drink a coffee. So it's a good location to spend some time and rest for a while. What we discovered is that as well that public charging is key for the development and of electric mobility, so that future EV drivers, they have the assurance that they can charge their vehicle outside their home and outside their work. And it's key for EV penetration. We asked them as well in which manner they were using their EV. Most of them, well, they were using their EV on a daily basis, and on working times, they were using their EVs around for long distances, for mostly 20 to 50 kilometers, which is again what we have in Europe in average in mobility patterns. Besides, most EVs, they were used in urban and interurban areas, which again, it matched with the average distance that the cars drive. And on the weekend, we had here long trips. That is the Eastern parts, that EV drivers, they were using their cars to go for excursions, to go for the second residence. And this mostly was a long trip. And what we saw here, what we understood is that EV drivers, they are not just good for the city, they are just as good to go for weekend trips. Regarding the problems, we started to make many questions to them, about the problems that they were facing with the public charging. And this is something that Juan has already mentioned before. We had a few problems regarding charging stations that they were not working, or they were being occupied by an internal combustion engine vehicle. There were some other problems that the charging station was on, but it had no communication, so you could not access to it. And in some other cases, the charging station didn't have any power, so you couldn't access. And what we see as well is that there are some companies, there's some utilities that they do have really difficult apps and access channels to the charging station. So for many different kinds of the population, it's quite difficult to access that charging stations because you have to register, you have to get an email, or you have to get an invoice, and the access possibilities to that charging stations are quite limited. And if really important is, as a summary, at the downtime of a charging station, it takes months to repair by the owners. It's not something that is being repaired fast or soon, it takes months. And if the apps or the channel or FIDs, they are not working, and there is not a proper hotline who can offer a good customer service, the EV drivers despair and they never return to that kind of network again. Another big problem that we saw and that we know actually is that there is huge price differences regarding the access to the different charging stations. Right now in Europe, we have a different kind of roaming access to charge stations. That means that if you have an app, you can access to different CPOs or charging station owners, even if you don't have a contract with them. And what we saw is that there are huge differences with the price, and there is a lack of transparency. It's really difficult sometimes to know how much you are paying and what you are paying when you access to a charging stations. And that means that we are in the business, so we understand that there is a lack of regulation regarding roaming Europe-wide, and that increases the cost up to 75% in some cases, and we have seen cases over 200% increase of price. From our side, from Electromaps, we would like to have a Europe-wide roaming regulation who we can make the price more easy for the end user and more transparent.
All right. Maybe Javier, sorry for interrupting here, but I'm looking at the time. I think you excellently pointed the 4 problems as you have foreseen in your presentation. So maybe you can go to the conclusion.
Yes, I will. Well, I think this question is important, just this one. Now, from the EV driver's perspective, the important thing to increase EV adoption is to have better cars with different models and increased battery size. This will spur the EV development. And last, and with that I finish, is from the EV driver's perspective, the value pyramid is this one. They need to find all charging stations. They need to know where they are located. They have to know if they are working or if they are free or occupied, and they have to know how they can use them. This is the important thing for the EV driver. And as a charging station owner, the value pyramid is you have to give visibility and attract EV drivers, and you have to be able to monitor, to counter, and to offer easy billing and roaming for your customers. And with that, I finish my presentation.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Javier, for your nice presentation and a lot of insights from practice. That's really interesting. Thank you so much. On the agenda, as a last, and I will make it very, very short, as a last presentation, it was foreseen that we would also talk a little bit about the survey that is foreseen in the project eCharge for Drivers. So that's a survey that we are working on right now. There is Jules Nuitens and Quentin de Klerk from our department MOBI at the VOB who are coordinating this. And well, as I already explained in the introduction, so we have 3 phases in the eCharge for Drivers project. And so the survey that we will be doing right now is a survey with respect to the concerns, the expectations and the perceptions of users. And that is in the preparation phase. So that then after the demonstration or during the demonstration and afterwards, the evaluation can be done with respect to the different elements that we survey right now in the survey that is foreseen, and that will be launched this month, November 2020. What is the content of this survey? Well, it is aimed at EV drivers, of course, to inform about their concerns, about their expectations, and about their perceptions with respect to charging infrastructure and with respect to their vehicle at the moment. But we also want to aim the survey at non-EV drivers, similarly as a user-centric project, because there we also see that, well, these will be the future users of the charging infrastructure. So also in that sense, that is important to take into account. Next to that, we will ask questions about the charging infrastructure for cars, but also for light electric vehicles. Questions are included in that questionnaire. We also target specific segments next to, well, I would say the private car users. We also have the logistics service providers, people driving light trucks, for example, because they also share the use of that charging infrastructure. And we also heard, we already heard that the business models are not quite easy at the moment. So by sharing different segments and by having them forming synergies together to optimize that business model might be interesting. So in that sense, we also target logistics service providers and another very interesting group of drivers that are the taxi drivers. So for each of the regions where we conduct a survey, also there an amount of taxi drivers will be surveyed and asked about their expectations and perceptions. Now, what is the content of the survey for the EV drivers? Well, I won't show you the whole questionnaire, similar as in the previous studies. There are quite a lot of questions because we need to have a very deep insight in the behavior and in the needs. But that means that it's a long list of questions. It starts with socio-demographic questions, and we also inform about their vehicle. For example, how long are they owning their vehicle seems to be an interesting variable to correlate and with other variables. The motives for using an AV is still interesting, those early adopters, and then people who are stepping into it a little bit later. What are the differences in their motives? Mobility and parking behavior, of course, because that influences what kind of charging infrastructure is needed, and vice versa, the chicken and the egg problem, of course. The charging behavior will also be questioned. And then we have 2 scientific scales that we use to study, first of all, the satisfaction of infrastructure and the service of the CPOs and of the MSPs. So that is a SIS diagnostic charging infrastructure satisfaction diagnostic that we developed at our Mobi group. Jules and I have been working on that now for already 2 years. And so that helps to have insight in how well the infrastructure and the service performs up to expectations of the users. And then we also have the technology acceptance model that is used in terms of, well, for example, the ease of use of infrastructure, and also the vehicle sometimes might make a difference. Also usefulness is one of the things that is questioned there. So also that is integrated in the long list. And finally, we already heard that the app-based services are also important in terms of communication, in terms of accessibility, in terms of payment services, of location services. So also that is included for the EV drivers. For the questionnaire for the non-EV drivers, it's a little bit more limited. Of course, we really want to go into their intentions, their reasons, and their motives for EVs. And then we also want to survey their mobility and parking behavior. But given that they don't have experience yet, this is really an explorative study in terms of what do they expect. And then how can we design the solutions in such a way that they answer their expectations. The survey will be conducted in 9 countries. You see here actually the cities and the regions where that the demonstrations of e-charge for drivers will be implemented. So we're talking about Barcelona, Grenoble, Berlin, Luxembourg, Zelig, Brussels, Belgium, and then Bari in Italy. And then for the regions, so the 10 T corridors, if you like, the longer trips are covered in Austria and northern Italy, in Greece, and finally in Istanbul and Western Turkey. So this is where that the questionnaire will be conducted. It was translated, or it is in the process at the moment of being finalized in terms of translation in French, Dutch, English, Greek, Turkish, Italian, Spanish, Catalan, and German. And so we expect to launch this mid-November. The last implementation details are to be finished at the moment. And so mid-November, we will launch the survey. By the end of the year, we expect the respondents to have answered those questions. And then in spring, we will analyze the results to present the results of our survey at the, well, before summer next year, I would say. So stay tuned. All details will be published on eCharge for Drivers website. And of course, we will also use social media panels and other ways to disseminate the survey so that we have a maximal reach. We did put some quota for representativeness of the results. So we will really go for very nice and well underpinned results there. So this is what is on the agenda for eCharge for Drivers at the moment. And well, I think this quite well aligns with the results of the surveys that we have just heard. The idea was that we would now actually have a panel discussion. I suggest that for now we skip that part, but I will unshare my screen, and I would like maybe to have a look at the chat if there are questions from the audience.
Lieselot, there's one question from Stefan in the Q&A box, and the question goes as following. Is it correct that the focus of this project is primarily on EV cars, whilst the biggest number of the EVs are currently light EVs such as bikes, etc.?
Okay, well, thanks, Stefan, for that question. I assume that question is directed towards the eCharge for Drivers project. Could also be to User Chai, to the User Chai project. Maybe I'll answer first for eCharge for Drivers. We have different demonstrations, and it is true that different demonstrators are working on the car charging infrastructure, but there is also a focus in terms of trying to combine the infrastructure. For example, in Zelik, we do have a parking lot with 100 car parkings, but there is also a bike sharing system foreseen, where then bikes or also bike parking is foreseen, where then bikes can be charged. There is also in the project foreseen that, for example, battery swapping for light electric vehicles will be studied. So we try to do this in synergy between cars and between the light electric vehicles. Because we do know that by just replacing ICE cars with electric cars, that won't really solve the mobility problem. So also that synergy needs to be sought. It's not the real focus of the project in terms of that modal shift, but we do try to stimulate it, especially by combining the solutions. And then maybe Matilda or Juan, do you want to elaborate a bit for user Chai?
Yeah, maybe I can just add a couple of words. Of course, I agree with you. EV cars are not the solutions. I mean, replacing with them would not bring any real benefit to cities. I think the focus of these two projects is indeed a bit on the car side, but I think this is also about the nature of the call itself. That was designed this way also to approach the 10T dimension, which I think is quite important, because we are not just looking at the charging infrastructures within the city, but also across the cities. And of course, in that case, labs are a bit less convenient. Nevertheless, in user Chi as well, we have looked at light electric vehicles, and we didn't go into the details in my presentations, but we do have one product that we will be testing in all the demo sites, which is a charging station for electric bikes, shared electric bikes, that is fueled through renewable energy sources, and that will bring also theft-proof parking for them. So this is certainly something we are looking at in user Chi as well.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Matilda, for also talking about user Chi with respect to light electric vehicles. So thank you, Stefan, for that question. And then I see a few other questions. With your permission, dear participants, we just run a little bit over time. So I have another question here from Aldo. And he says, is it worth checking how users accept smart charging, as we can expect limitations of the electric grid for charging at full capacity at all time? And I completely agree that this idea of smart charging is well worth looking into. And that is actually also what we are doing in the eCharge for Drivers project. So there is a lot of attention to the current mobility behavior, and especially also the parking behavior of EV drivers, because that will also determine whether they are well open for smart charging or not. Do they expect a car that is always 100% charged and that they can drive up to the maximal range? Or would they be comfortable with a little bit less? And especially in terms of, for example, managing agendas, can they share that information and then allow the car to be used as a battery on wheels, actually, when we go to vehicle to grid charging? So also these kinds of questions is what we are studying, and it is included in the survey. So that is for eCharge for Drivers. And maybe Matilda about user Chi.
Maybe Juan, on this specific question, can tell us a bit more whether this was investigated in the users' research.
Sure, yeah, I was thinking that, yeah, B2G, vehicle to grid, is something that is also part of user Chi. Project is something that is on the table, but we have noticed that, sorry, we still don't have charge. As I was saying, we have problems with charging. So a smart charge will be probably the next step. But what we have to ensure now for the deployment of the electrical vehicle, we think, is that the charge is assured, that the user has access to a charging point when he needs, and it's not occupied. It's working properly. It's not I don't know. It's not broken. You've been talking about vandalism, for example. And probably, yeah, that's very interesting. That yeah, it's very attractive to have this smart charging. But I think, and this is a personal insight or a personal point of view, I think it will have to wait till we ensure the charge.
Yes, I completely agree, Juan. I think this goes again along this adoption curve in terms of charging. We now have I would say the early adopters already being familiar with the regular charging infrastructure, and probably they will be the early adopters for the smart charging. But then when we go to a broader market, less experienced users, the fact that we have the charging infrastructure just available already and findable and accessible, I think that is the first concern. But indeed, when the number of EVs goes up, this smart charging solution will enter slowly also into the broader user community. All right. This is, this was the last question that I can see from the participants. There is another one just coming in by Puya. Does this project take into account being in line with the foreseen changes in the infrastructure for autonomous vehicles? Oh wow, I really like this question. It's indeed a challenge that we are facing in terms of the future mobility evolutions. And the automation of vehicles. And for what we are doing at the moment in this project, actually we are looking into the current, so I would say the non-automated vehicles. But the idea of having a look at how, for example, the location of charging stations should be planned when we assume that cars can drive up to charging hubs, for example, that by themselves don't need human interaction. That is something that we as a research group, we are working on that in other projects. But for the eCharge for Driver project, that is not the focus at the moment. I don't know about user Chi. Have you been thinking about this?
Well, the same is not the main focus in user Chi either, but of course, this is an important development that we have to take into account, and it will be part of the considerations that we will make in yet another product we have, which is called Stations of the Future. So when we will be drafting our recommendations, let's say for the perfect charging stations that we will be using in the future, of course we will take into consideration autonomous vehicles, because that's becoming more and more like the next reality.
Yeah, and if I can say something, I think it's a matter of communication. So we are saying that for the new mobility, we have to plan. So yeah, this is something that the users are saying. Probably like not a very, like a negative point, we could say, because you have to plan. If you want to afford a long range trip, for example, you have to plan. So plan means communicating, means I want to go from here to here, and I am going to church. I am going to make a pre-booking, and all these things of communication are very involved with the autonomous car, because autonomous car is communication. So we are not tackling the autonomous the autonomous car or the autonomous vehicle, but I think it's very related, because we have to improve the communication between the car and the availability of the poles, and the communication between the pole and the car while you are charging. For example, smart charging is also that. So we are not directly addressing, but it's really very, very involved.
Oh. Okay, all right, Juan. Maybe Javier, do you have a take on this?
Related to automatic charging, and not really. From our view, we see that quite far away, 5-10 years, and it's too far away for our not time frame as a startup. Yes.
Yeah, indeed. It's a longer time horizon perspective. Although that, for example, for the planning of the locations of charging infrastructure, for example, I would think that that can make a difference. So in that sense, I understand that from an operational point of view at the moment, this is a longer term, but on the other side, from a strategic point of view, maybe might be interesting to also already keep in mind. Although, yeah, for me, electrification and automation, they go hand in hand. We first have this electrification wave that is now really coming up, and then the automation wave will go simultaneously, but maybe a little bit slower than the electrification that is ongoing right now. All right, I have a look at the clock. Is there any closing remark the panel would like to formulate, or maybe we can wrap up? I see that the attendees are very patiently and interested for the session. So maybe Mathilde, would you like to give a closing remark, given that we have a lot of well, cities and regions participating?
But maybe more an invite from my side to keep a close look at what those two projects are working on, because I think the cities, authorities, and regions as well are going to benefit very much from what we are working on, from the different innovative solutions that we will be working on. So I really invite you to also go and visit the user-chi.eu website and to stay tuned, not only for the further results that we will be publishing, but also activities where you can get involved. So yeah, hope to hear from you soon.
All right, thank you, Mathilde. Juan, you want to add to this?
No, I think Mathilde wrap up is perfect. So thank you. And yeah, invite to everybody to follow our project, and thanks for inviting to your webinar.
All right, thank you, Juan. And then Javier, you want to add to this?
Well, I just added, if they have any question regarding mobility, they can ask any of us, and we will really happy to support them with the project, with the mobility questions, that we are happy to support them with our knowledge and experience. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Javier. Well, also from my part, a kind invitation to follow up, especially also to participate in the survey that will be launched, and then to follow up on the project results that we will present throughout the next 4 years. I am grateful for all the attendants to participate to this webinar, so thank you very much. And also, of course, to POLIS, Sabina, thank you for the organization of the webinar. I give the floor back to you.
Thank you to all our participants, and mostly to our speakers and our moderator for this session. Stay tuned, as our speakers have already mentioned, and we hope to share the valuable results on the user acceptance when it comes to the EV uptake and the rollout of the charging infrastructure in the next years. So we keep on working, and we hope to do it with user-chi and eCharge for drivers together. Okay, thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you very much.